Good morning, my name's Tom. Today I'm going to show you through a 10-minute stretching, mobility and core strength that you can do every single morning, no excuses. The beauty of this little routine is that it should be fairly easy to remember once you have done it a couple of times. It is taking on a few yoga moves and also a few moves from Pilates and certain things that I've learned over the years which work well for cyclists and runners. For me, I employ it every single morning into my daily routine. Before breakfast, get straight into this routine. I sit myself into this lovely bay window that I have set up. What that does is it lets in absolutely tons of natural light and really helps me feel awake and start the day. Not only is this session going to improve your flexibility and mobility over a period of time, but it also actually makes you feel a little bit more awake, a little bit more human, and sets you up for the day. I find when I first wake up in the morning, especially in tough training blocks, I often feel like a crippled old man for the first 10 minutes of waking. And after I've done this little sequence, it does make me feel a little bit more athletic and in tune with my body. It kind of irons out any stiffness, any aches and pains, gets the juices flowing and makes me feel good. So I would advise doing it in the morning, and at the end of the day it takes about 10 minutes, so there is no excuses not to fit it in. If you've got a hectic morning, you can set your alarm 10 minutes earlier and it won't have any significant impact on your sleep. So we are going to start this procedure in a seated position. So cross your legs, keep upright, just in a standard kind of yoga pose, yoga starting pose, hands on your knees, and really try and keep your back straight. So we are not like this, we are not arching our back, we are keeping our back upright, looking forward. Now the way in which you can do this is really think about rotating your chest upwards and keeping that nice flat back position. So you're holding that position there, and this really enforces good posture. And yeah, I said I'm not going to mention breathing, but you can really think a little bit about taking some deep, meaningful breaths here. Now, while you're in this position, I also like to do some sideward bends. So you can quite often get very tight in the side and your hips. So I often like to do some sideward bends, not forcing anything, but just mobilizing the spine a little bit. So if you drop your left hand to the floor, maintaining that good posture of your spine, bring the other hand up towards your ear and just a very small sideward bend. Again, what we're not doing is coming forward, falling forward. You're keeping nice and upright, opening the chest and bend to the side. Hold that for 10 seconds or so and then change to the other side. I then get up into flat back tabletop position. What we're doing here is moving that vertebrae in different positions just to move that fluid around and keep the mobility in the joints. So that being full extension, which is when the tailbone is up and we are opening the chest as much as we possibly can, and then the opposing where we drop that tailbone under and have a curvature of the spine. So I'm going to now transition between those two movements, nice and slow and steady, maybe 5 to 6 times. And that will help mobilize my spine. It feels good, it stretches out your abs a little bit there when you're in this position, and in this position here, stretches out the back. And again, it's just, none of these moves are forced, you just take it through where you want to go, exaggerate a little bit at the top, but without causing any pain or discomfort. From there, we're going to go into probably one of the most common yoga moves, which is a downward dog. Up onto feet. Feet are fairly well planted. Legs are effectively as straight as you possibly can. You're allowed a little bit of a bend at your knees if required, but if you've got the mobility to completely straighten out your legs, drop your heels to the ground, then please do. What I like to do is I like to paddle this move out a little bit. So I like to just alternatively drop the heel on each of my feet, one at a time like that. And what that does is it really straightens out my hamstrings, just rocking my hips a little bit there, and feels really good all the way down that posterior chain. After a few of those, I then like to come into a lunge position. So to do that, I like to bring one foot up, tensing the glute, keeping stability through the core and the hamstring. And then this foot comes all the way through to the hands here. Release the hands, and now I'm into this lunge position with the back knee on the ground. With this back knee on the ground, you'll feel a lot of tension in the hip flexor. If you don't push your hips further forward, your arms can come up above your head, almost like you're holding a ball, and just rock those hips forward. Now again, first thing in the morning, we don't want to do too many static stretches. So what I like to do is keep this moving for a sequence. So what I do is I come down into this position with my hands on the floor. I straighten out that front leg a little bit so I can feel tightness in the hamstring here, and then go back into this position. And I continue that maybe 3 or 4 times on each leg. While I'm also in this position, what I like to do is I like to come back to here, raise this rear foot into this lunge position, and then bring my upper body up like this. So this is, I think, in a yoga what they call a warrior position. I like to extend my hands and have a little bit of a twist towards the open side. This foot here can come down into this position here to give you some stability, but you can really feel a nice stretch in the groin inside of this leg, and a lot of stability and strength into this front leg. Drop it down and come up. Straight leg, drop it down. And I like to basically transition up and down in this movement a few times there, because it really feels good stretching the inside of this leg and providing strength and stability to this front leg here, giving it nice, slow, controlled movements up and down. We're never excessively stressing any of the positions. We're just taking it up to where it becomes a bit testing, and then we're bringing it back down again. So coming back down, I'm basically going to switch back to the other leg now. Dropping that down, knee up, back into plank position, downward dog, looking down, and then the other leg, the right leg, comes up, tensing that glute, comes down to my hands, dropping that knee, and then chest up. Back into this position, drop the knee down, and then into the tabletop position. From here, what I like to do also is, I believe it's called COBRA in a yoga move. So basically dropping the hips forward onto the floor, looking up and stretching the front of the body. I also like to do a bit of a sideways movement here, looking back to my feet, one side and the other. Again, none of these moves at all should be rushed. Take your time. I also like to rock now and again into the child's pose when I'm doing this. It just feels nice. But this is kind of quite free. Like, it's not set in stone, it's all by feel. So, you know, if you're doing this and you feel like a bit of tension in the back, then obviously you just want to come into this child's pose, just free that off. But it's really based on feeling. You know, if you feel like a lot of benefit from that, then sit there a little bit longer. The last little thing that I do in this sequence is just a little bit of work to switch on my posterior chain, so my back and my glutes. So what I have a tendency to do is I get into this position here again, this tabletop position, and I do some bird dog movements, which basically is alternating one leg out with the opposing arm out as well. So I'm basically off balance. So right now my left hand is on the ground, but my right leg is on the ground. I find stability in that and hold it for a few seconds, and then I will simply put those down and change. Really find tension in that rear glute and shoulder. Keep that core tight and really proactively think about switching on all of your back. You know, don't let yourself sink, don't let yourself rock, don't let your hips come in like this. Really find tension in everything. Once you've done one on each side, what I like to do is incorporate a little bit of movement. So I like to go out, come in, out, in, out, and in 3 times for each one. Really proactively, again, thinking about that muscle, how it's working. You can quite easily make this a lot easier by speeding up the movement and not necessarily thinking about that extension each time. But if you really zone in on what muscles are working, you can make it a lot more difficult, and that's what we're after. The last thing that I do, just to switch my glutes on, is to get into this position here. And basically, feet flat on the floor, hip distance apart. I'm just going to raise my pelvis. So in this position here, top of the back's on the floor, my heels are on the floor. I'm just going to raise my pelvis. Now again, you can make this easy by being like this, or you can make it a lot harder by really actively tensing your glutes, your bum muscles. So really tense your glutes in this position, hold it for 5 seconds or so, and then release. Go back up, tense your glutes in that position, and release. What I also like to do while I'm in this position sometimes is just to bring my hands above my head, maybe even coming down to the side of my body, because that kind of stretches out my shoulders and makes that all feel good. A couple of those. You can even make your hips off balance by lifting one foot out straight while keeping your hips flat. Feel the tension in that glute, then come back down, change legs. Again, really focusing on keeping core nice and tight, hips balanced. Back down, switch legs. Again, this is where you need to focus a little bit on breathing, yes, because it's easy to just stop breathing when you're in this position. And finish there. I lastly like to finish with just coming back into this position. Self-time to just sit down, think a little bit. I'm going to start a little list in terms of what I need to do today, so that I can make my day as productive as possible. But yeah, hope you enjoyed that short little snippet in terms of an example of what I do in the morning. It only takes 10 minutes, and if you can bring that into most of your mornings, if not every morning, you will feel the benefits in terms of getting a little bit more flexible and just feeling more human. This isn't necessarily going to make you the most flexible person in the world, but what it will do is it'll just counteract those that tightness which is occurred through tough training. Until next time, see you later.